So you're all very welcome tonight for the first opening session of First Wednesday Spring Series, where we will focus on conflict migration through the lens of solidarity. In this event, we will look at how solidarity with Ukraine can look like in the light of current really tragic, really upsetting events, I think, for everyone. Here tonight with us, we have activists from Ukraine based in Ireland and beyond, and also people working, representing organization that is working on Polish border on the front line of the really huge humanitarian crisis, both on Ukrainian border with Poland, but also with Belarusian border, which is a crisis that is not being talked about recently. So we have Zoriana Psik, based in Ireland. We have Maryna Szewcowa, who is joining us today from Slovenia, and Monika Matus from Grupa Granica, joining us today from Poland. You're all very welcome. And this event will be moderated by Dr. Kieran Doyle of International Development Department of Maynooth University, who is the partner of this event. And also I would like to say a big thank you to Concern Worldwide, who make this event possible by financial support. And so this event is part of a bigger series, as I said, and we are kind of focusing on solidarity with people seeking refuge and people who were forced to leave their countries and looking for safety and going on very often very dangerous journeys and not being welcomed very often as well across the world. This is in the context of the war in Ukraine, but also we would like to share this solidarity with everybody else who is seeking refuge, regardless of their nationality, skin color, religion, gender, and so on and so on. We also want to, one of our events, so we have two upcoming events, one in May and one in June. Each of them will be at the same time on the first Wednesday of each month. The next one, we will be looking at solidarity in crisis, where we will, kind of look at dualities of our attitudes and how we can actually extend our solidarity with all other people who need our support and who need, the same kind of welcoming as Ukrainian refugees are looking, are facing right now. But we will be looking at the Fortress Europe and why our attitudes are different to different people. And at the event in June, we will be looking at criminalization of humanitarian workers, which I think especially Monika has experienced and looked at, on the Belarusian border, where just a few hundred miles away, the same people who are oppressors are actually very welcoming. So, and the same people from Syria, and other humanitarian workers are facing on the Mediterranean. So, and other places like US and also in Latin America. So we will be looking at this in May. So you're all very welcome, and I will be sending you more information after the event. Just a bit of housekeeping. As I said, this event is recorded and should be available tomorrow for you to watch and share with everybody else. I will be sending an email tomorrow or next week with all the information that speakers tonight would like to share with you. I would also ask you if you can donate to Grupa Granica or any other organizations that Maryna or Zoriana would like to share with you. Because they are really, in need of support. I know that probably all of you supported already some sort of organization, but, I would really encourage you to support them. And also, we will be asking questions at the end of the discussion. So you will be able to only use the chat, but your question will be sent to our host, and she will send it to Kieran to ask to our speakers. And you can find out more and join our newsletter. I would encourage you to stay in touch with us and visit our website at www.colov.org. So that's enough of me speaking. I give the floor to Kieran And you're all very welcome once again. And I hope you will enjoy and you will learn from this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eka. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you this evening. It's a very important issue that's under discussion. And we have three very distinguished speakers, people that have great insights. And the focus of this evening is to ascertain their insights and to find out what's going on, what are their observations, what are their experiences, and what can they relay to us as members of more or less the Irish public. It's a momentous day. Today, the Ukrainian president addressed the Irish Parliament, and that was received extremely well. And it is a matter of great national importance to us that we are seen to be contributing. Obviously, there's a bigger picture within this, that we are members of the EU, and we are active members of the UN. And I think Ireland wants to be seen to contribute. And one of the first ways that you can design your contribution, and this is something I've been teaching today earlier with members of the international community on a conflict analysis course. The first thing you have to do is gather information. And this is what we're doing here this evening. We're gathering information so that as we make our intervention and as we contribute, that's made in the best way possible. So our three speakers, we've Marina, we have Zoryana, and we've Monica. And I'd like to start by asking them to introduce themselves and just to say where they are, just to say what their line of work is, and just how do things look from their vantage point. Very basic, very general introduction, and we can then start to work down into the granular detail in further questions. So I'm just wondering where you are with regards to the Ukrainian conflict. So Mariana, would you like to go first, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Kieran, and thank you very much for having me today and letting me speak on behalf of other Ukrainians. My name is Marina Shevtsova. I'm Ukrainian, and I'm from Dnipro, the city that is in the middle of Ukraine. And now I'm based in Slovenia. I have two pieces of information I probably need to share about myself. So one is that I'm a political scientist. I'm a visiting professor here at Ljubljana University, and I teach and I do research on so-called anti-gender movements in Eastern Europe. So resistances that exist in Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova against sexual and gender equalities. And on the other hand, I'm also a human rights activist. I've been working for many years for various NGOs in Ukraine, and now I'm a director of my own NGO, Equal Opportunities Platform, which are working with, fighting against discrimination, for creating safe school environment for diverse children, students. And in the past, I worked a lot with LGBTQ organizations, and particularly Tergo, that works with schools and with parents of LGBTQ students. So today, the perspectives that I can probably bring is one on some refugees present in different minority vulnerable groups coming to Europe, but also to those groups who cannot leave Ukraine and who are now there for different reasons, and maybe they are not mentioned that often in the larger discourse rhetoric because, for obvious reasons. So I would be open to contribute on that.
Excellent, thank you, Marina. Zoryana, would you like to make your opening remarks?
Thank you so much, Kieran. So my name is Zoryana Pshek. I have been living in Ireland for the past 16 years. I came to Ireland as an asylum seeker, and I tend to call myself an ex-asylum seeker because it's the identity that shaped my present, my past, and definitely my future. My day job is I work in Mainz University as a community connector. So I focus on the supports and progress to higher education for marginalized community groups that are disadvantaged and not represented in higher education. I don't call myself an activist whatsoever. My work is, or my, my volunteering, I suppose, is around adult education. And so the work that I do is educating communities about asylum seekers and refugees in Ireland. I suppose I have been involved for 16 years, as long as I am in Ireland, in the local community development in County Kildare. So I'm chairperson for Kildare Integration Network. And I suppose since the 24th of February, in many ways in the county, I would be the contact person for the agencies, as well as for the local people and Ukrainian people arriving for all sorts of needs and activities, from translation and to personal supports, whatever is needed. So that's me. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you, Zoriana. And Monica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you for having me as well. So my presence here, I guess, has two layers, two aspects to it. One is my professional personal background. So I've been working for over 20 years with humanitarian aid NGOs, development aid NGOs, as a human rights activist, campaigner, building the biggest online campaigning NGOs in Poland, etc., etc. And then I also volunteered for quite some time at the Greek islands in my free time during the biggest crisis in 2015, 2016, and on the Balkan route. And then somehow in September last year, it just happened so that I finished my job. And my friend called me and said, could you please come to the border, to the northern Polish-Belarusian border, because we really need you. We need many people to go to the forest and actually pull people out and help them, but we also need people to do communications about it and let the public know. So since then, I've been one of communications lead and advocacy lead for Grupa Granica, which is a network, a social movement that was created around actually firstly Polish-Belarusian border of 13 NGOs and countless people, independent activists and also local residents all along this border. And most of these NGOs have been working already in Poland with migrants in various ways, providing legal support, psychological support, etc., etc. And so obviously on 24th of February, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we, part of our focus as well went, I cannot say back, but again, or let's say we just started to focus on both borders, which I must say is not an easy task. And also it's very, in a ways, and I'm going to be not politically correct now, but I'm going to say it's really schizophrenic in many ways, seeing, working with communicating about two borders. And I'm just using this word for the lack of more strong words. So if anybody knows the strong word, such strong word for this, please help me out. I'm not a native English speaker. And yes, this is my perspective on actually, I've been seeing humanitarian crisis in Poland now for almost 7 months in the north. And now we have another huge humanitarian crisis, but completely different in a way. in the south of Poland and actually in the whole Poland, unfortunately. So that's my two perspectives.
Okay. So just to summarize there, Marina, you're an academic, a Ukrainian academic based in Slovenia at the moment. You're in the University of Ljubljana at the moment. So Jana, you're Ukrainian based in Ireland, working in Maynooth. And Monica, you're a Polish NGO manager. Okay. And okay, so I'm just wondering from your perspectives, what are the developing issues that are now happening in Ukraine? Obviously, we're not talking here this evening about the conflict per se or the military aspects or any of that. I'm just, from your perspective, what are the human aspects of this that are developing? Marina, would you like to pass comment first, please?
Yes, of course. So I think the most obvious thing that's been going on is a huge displacement of people, and I'm sure that that's what my colleagues will be saying too. And displacement within Ukraine, and then beyond Ukrainian borders. So we have, I think now more than 4 million of people who left Ukraine. And we have around more than 10 million of people who are displaced within Ukraine. So these are people who had to leave their houses, and it happened to them in very different situation, in the sense that some were, I don't want to say lucky, maybe it's not a good word, but basically those who escaped before something happened to their houses, and some had to flee when their houses were already in the process of being destroyed or destroyed. And the ways in which these people had to move across the country, and Ukraine is a huge country. I think some people don't realize this until they look at the map and can compare. So the distances that they have to cross are huge, and there is a lack of, so not everybody, of course, has a car. So trains are full. People have to be like 19, 20 people in a compartment that normally is designed for 4 people. And there are elderly people with disabilities, so all kind of families with small kids. So this is the most obvious thing, that people lost houses. Many of them lost jobs. And people now are arriving to many people arrive to Western Ukraine and stay there, and there is a huge housing crisis there because, well, first of all, prices went up, and even though there is this urge to keep the market still, of course, some people actually, I know people who left Ukraine for Poland because it's cheaper for them to find places in Poland than to stay in Western Ukraine. And another thing is that only people who are allowed to leave the country are women, elderly people younger than 18, so children, teenagers. And for men, these are only men who either have some serious disability or illness, or they have more than 4 children, or I think 4 children, 4 children and more. So we have many men who also are displaced. They moved to Western Ukraine or to other cities that are safer than those cities that are destroyed or being bombed regularly. So yeah, I think what we can define it as a humanitarian crisis, and then we could, I don't want to take much time now, but we could go to tackle any separate group, and then there will be very different and tough problems within it.
Okay. So Jana, the most pressing issues of the moment in Ukraine and in your experience?
In my experience, maybe not in my experience, but in what I observe rather than, my experience. But I think one of important issues is the access to medical treatments, as well as the access to medicine itself, the lack of it for the people I'm not even mentioning the areas where, like the hot areas where people are dying every day. Obviously, they don't have any access because there's no support from Red Cross, I suppose, which should be there. And I think it's really worth mentioning that we are not raising this awareness in Western world, but in Ukraine for the past week, the talks about Red Cross supporting Russia. So going back to Ireland, if I am thinking how much money Irish people had raised for Red Cross Ireland, and that Red Cross has 20,000 accommodations waiting for Ukrainian people in Ireland to be accommodated. However, none of those people who submitted their proposal of accommodation that I would know of personally, they have not received communication for Garda vetting, which means that those houses haven't been vetted and the people are being literally scattered around the country. So I know it's like it's not happening in Ukraine, but that's what I'm observing here. And unfortunately, I don't know why we are not talking about the importance and reliance on Red Cross that is not happening, and the amounts of money that are there, which brings me to the lack of transparency of charitable organizations in the world and where the money are going and where the supports are going that's supposed to be in Ukraine.
Okay.
So that's that. And one of the points that I wanted to say, yes, that's the uncertainty that is there for people. So it's like there's one quiet day and it seems like people relax a little bit because there's hope that the war stops. Maybe there are a bit of talks, or maybe there is a purposeful pause in the attacks, and then it happens again, and that uncertainty that you don't know where the next missile is going to fall, which is obviously it is a war, but I think some type of political will and for prevention should happen, which is not happening and is not being observed. There's like bits and pieces that are happening, but there are no systematic political will, which is really unfortunate. And that brings even more uncertainty for the people of Ukraine.
Thank you for those insights. And we'll come back to them again. You mentioned some very important points there around political will, but also the connection between what seems like donations, a lot of donations, and actually impact on refugees' lives, and how refugees can sense that they are being cared for within the system. So we'll come back to that point. Monica, what are the most pressing issues for you on the ground in Poland?
So obviously there are many. I think starting with uncertainty, because I think it's also a theme here. We have right now, I think I've read that it's already 2.5 million people here in Poland. When you ask migration experts, so like, academics who study routes of migration and whatnot, and they can do all of these calculations, everybody is saying we are able to allow and to get into way of living, let's say, and full access to everything. We are able to get around 700,000-800,000 people to get integrated or to be able to thrive in a society, so to speak. So I think what we really urgently, also you need to remember that majority of the people who are in Poland are in private houses, which is something unheard of I think all around the world, if you talk about the humanitarian aid crises, people internally and, you know, displaced outside and refugees, I think it's unheard of that people have been, so many of them, in private houses. Of course, we wouldn't be able to host so many people otherwise, but then the question is, what's next? You know, we are now entering, we're over 40 days of war. Of course, the Polish government has, in their great whitewashing PR exercise, as we like to call it, proposed, you know, quite generous financial and legislation help for people for refugees from Ukraine, which is absolutely great, but it doesn't really solve the issues long term, which I think are problematic, because we already know that many of the people will not be able to find jobs in Poland. They will not be able to, you know, to have the same access as everybody else, and then basically that will be kind of, you know, breeding frustrations and resentment, etc. And we are already seeing signs of it, unfortunately. So the way to prevent it probably would be to have some sort of, you know, ideal utopian relocation system. But then again, of course, we don't know how long the war will take. So I find it, you know, personally also, I find it very difficult to talk to some people. If I meet, you know, my friends are hosting Ukrainian families, etc. And if I meet them, it's also very difficult to like even propose it, because of course you want to stay close just in case the war ends tomorrow, next week, etc. And rightly so. I mean, probably I would do exactly the same.
Okay.
So I do believe, you know, we have in Poland a huge crisis on our hands, but like, which is going to evolve. So right now it's a humanitarian crisis. Then probably we will have some sort of social tensions and social issues, inevitably. And it's like, it's nobody's fault. Like basically it is, you know, it's the situation. And I do believe we need some sort of systemic solutions to that, or even like systemic prevention to that. What's happening as well in Poland is that almost all of the like accommodation, not only housing, but like, you know, the help, let's say overall, is based on non-governmental organizations and volunteers. Really, literally 90% of what's been offered, apart from the legislation from the central government, most of the rest is really being offered by NGOs, by individual people, sometimes by local authorities like Warsaw or Krakow. That's maybe 2 cities, but the rest, you know, for the rest, it really takes a long time to kind of get a grip and catch up with the situation. So I think this is going to collapse at some point. We have many volunteers, many people who work at the border who already kind of understand the system and can navigate around it, but they are on the verge of collapsing. Like I spoke today I'm just going to give you an example. I spoke today to my friend who is a psychologist, and she is since 2 weeks in Przemyśl, so very close to one of the major border crossings, and she works with volunteers and providing psychological support. And she says, okay, we have here a team of international psychologists and trauma psychologists, etc., who are obviously, you know, there for refugees from Ukraine, but we have almost nobody who is talking to people who have been there for over a month, you know, sorting stuff, also sort of acknowledging all this trauma and taking it in. So I do believe our government is kind of taking it for granted at the moment, but at some point it's just gonna, like, the system is just not gonna be able to do it anymore. And unfortunately, as it looks of now, we are not able, like none of us is able to predict where this conflict is going to go. But we see that it's not going to end tomorrow, right? So we can expect more and more people. Yeah, so to summarize it, we need a lot of systemic solutions to what's happening now in Poland. We definitely need a relocation system, which would be diplomatic and gentle and developed in a way that people actually can use it and feel safe in it and feel, you know, welcomed in other countries. And we need some sort of long-term thinking.
Okay. Zoriana, do you, with regards to the frustration there with the efforts of national government in Poland, do you share that sense of frustration with the efforts of national government in Ireland? Is this something that you have observed?
Well, living here for such a long time, I suppose I know how Irish systems work, and I suppose the I don't know, maybe gratitude that I have to Irish government, the way they were able to step in and in many ways to lead the way on, expressing the possibility of triggering the article. Well, first of all, waiving the visas for Ukrainians. It was the first country to waive the visas, obviously outside of the European Union or Schengen, outside of Schengen, and influencing other countries like United States, Canada, United Kingdom. So it was very encouraging. It was very hopeful to witness for all Ukrainian community in Ireland, but also for the Irish community, because I've been saying it already many times, but I think Irish community, maybe number one, maybe number two, I'm not sure, charitable country in the world. And so we know the kindness and the empathy of Irish people. But I think what we witnessed here is an absolute Irish Cadmile Fulce, that when Irish people have opened their houses, their hearts, so it is not only coming from the government, but comes also from the ordinary people, same as in Poland and in many other countries. But obviously, I don't see that, I read that from the news, but what I see here is absolutely amazing. I know there was a time from the 24th until about the 11th of 12th of March, when the government was trying to figure out how they are going to approach developing systemic approach to housing the Ukrainian refugees and supporting them. So there was a little bit of hanging in time or something, but then people were able to receive the supports and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, we don't hear any communication regarding the housing, and so as it transpired from yesterday or the day before from the Ukrainian people, that they are now being housed in probably hotels or hostels similar to the direct provision system, which I wouldn't want to see. I had been living in one for 6 years. I think it's deeply damaging. I think it's affecting mental health for anyone who is in such system. However, if those hotels or hostels are temporary solutions created for this support and navigation in the same manner as they were created for the resettlement program, this is a different story. I can understand that at the moment in Ireland, we the other day the number was 17,000, probably going up to 20 today or tomorrow. So for Ireland, in the ratio of population, it is already a huge number. And with the housing crisis that we had for years since 2008, without houses being built after the recession, obviously it is a huge issue. So I think I lost it what I was trying to say, but I hope that
just with regards to connecting between the Irish government and efforts on the ground. So you're saying, what I'm reading is that you can see a massive effort being put in at all sides. Is that being felt? Is that being felt by the communities?
I think it is. Situations like someone coming to an extended relative from Ukraine here, falling out with the extended relative and being housed by the Irish family within hours, from a person who does not need to give any commitment from an Irish family, but people are being taken into the houses, exactly as Monica was saying, which is as well unheard of in Ireland. I know Ireland was going to move direct provision system more into the community setting, which probably would have the community involved in the way that community is involved. But we've seen an absolute activism from general population of Ireland, and the supports that are out there are very absolutely heartfelt. I know that each county is dealing in different way, but it's also very good. For example, in County Kildare, we had I'm going to finish up just in a moment. We had an emergency response forum to the pandemic, and the forum has met and has been meeting now as an emergency to support Ukrainian refugees. So it's like I'm observing some quick thinking, quick response, again working on the ground with the community. So from the community development perspectives, the only thing is, same as Monica mentioned, that again the uncertainty.
It's early days.
Yes, and the thing is, as we all know, Ukrainian people don't want to leave their homes. They don't want to leave their families behind. They want to live in peace in their own homes. And safe. And so I think we are reacting, but we need to be proactive to prevent that in some way.
Okay. Well, we're at the very start. Hopefully it's not going to go on too long. Marina, you've waited quite patiently to come back in. I'm curious around your views on this sedimentation of refugees into long-term acceptance of their new home. I'm also curious about your own research and your own interest in the experiences of the LGBTI community. And I'm just wondering about the particular challenges of people from a diverse background within this resedimentation and transference of life into a new location.
Yes, thank you. These are two complex questions, but I will try to answer them in a short, concise manner. So I've been thinking a lot about. I've been working on the topic of migration and also LGBTQ refugees for quite some time as a researcher. And now, of course, I also, as an activist, try to talk to people, and we do now a series of YouTube videos for Ukrainians in different countries, how to look for job, how to find these job opportunities, because, this is, of course, the first rhetoric that comes to, any populist or right-wing party. Once the situation, people get used to the situation and become less sympathetic towards refugees, and it comes that refugees are, on the welfare, they are taking our jobs or they are taking our taxes that we are paying. So, of course, for many Ukrainians, on the one hand, it is also very important not to feel as if they were, if they were using somebody's taxpayers' money and being there for free. So they want to work and to find some solutions to get income. But while this sounds very optimistic, and of course we know that the EU offered a different way of protection for Ukrainian refugees, so that people from Ukraine get right to find job, to work, not like refugees normally who are not allowed to have jobs. And we know that we had this large numbers of young men from Syria, for example, in Germany, who were full of energy but were not able to access the job market. So on the one hand, it seems that we have this young, educated, very often people from Ukraine, and I read already some optimistic analysis in some journals on how actually the situation with unemployment in the EU is quite good now. So there are jobs out there. And there are people coming, so maybe the EU can absorb. But then, of course, this is overly optimistic, because people who are coming, as I said already, are often mothers with children, often with small children. Second thing is that, of course, the language. So I think Poland in this situation might be the most welcoming place, but still, if you want to apply for a higher qualified job, it will take you at least half a year with knowing Ukrainian to learn the language. I'm in Slovenia. Slovenian language is a Slavic language, but I've been learning intensely for a year already. I cannot speak yet. So, you know, this shows, so a person like myself, who does not want to have a job which requires only physical efforts, will need at least 1 year of this language courses. Children will need support with integration into schools. So there is no short-term solution. Also, many states, I can speak about Balkans, for example, even though they offer this thing with the job and language support, language study support, most of them have not been implemented yet. So it's like the policy has been declared or voiced, but nobody yet has received actually this actual work permit. So to start to look for jobs, people still need the papers, and until then, they stay in some very difficult housing situation and so on. So this is on this side, and I'm sure that my colleagues will will add more to that. But I wanted to speak a little bit then on behalf of LGBTQI people, because this is very important. And one thing is, and in which probably Ukrainian LGBTQ community could be supported. So the problem is that in Ukraine, men between 18 and 60-year-old, they cannot leave the country, which means, for example, that all gay men, cisgender gay men from 18 to 60-year-old have to stay there. And it also means that trans women who didn't go through the transition yet and still have the gender market male in their passports, even if they live the life as a woman already, they also cannot leave the country. And this puts them in particularly vulnerable situation. So the problem is that many NGOs that offer support and volunteers that offer support, they offer this support in the EU countries already, which is very generous. And this is something I wanted also to stress what Monica and Zorana said. So much has been done by volunteers, and as an activist myself, I know that the burnout is one of the highest level among people who work in this helping, assisting professions, and these are psychologists, doctors, but also activists. So we have, and now it will, increase, and nothing is being done for these people. No psychological support, sometimes no acknowledgement even proper, because it also could be helpful of their efforts. But the problem is that there are many organizations, human rights organizations, NGOs in Ukraine that work, and it's very difficult for them to get the. So many of them, for example, have funding, but their donors not always allow them to use this funding for humanitarian purposes, so to buy things. So they have money for some project activities, they cannot perform because now all activities is stopped, or they don't want to do training or diversity workshops. Instead, they need to buy basic supplies, and many donors reacted well, and they said, yes, you can spend this funding, but many didn't. So actually, what would be very helpful if people didn't donate to Red Cross, because we do have a lot of proofs in Ukraine also that it showed absolutely useless when they refused to create humanitarian corridors from Mariupol and from cities around Kiev, when they refused to provide their marking on the trucks to evacuate people, but instead to, to donate to grassroots organizations for particular things. Like, I understand people don't want to donate for weapons. I understand the different moral, ethical standards. You can donate for people to buy, hygienic products, food, to sleep in mattresses, to maintain shelters, and this is something that would be really, really, necessary.
So okay. Some questions are starting to pop in there, and I think it ties into your point there, Marina, around in Ireland. There's been several high-profile fundraising events, and some of these are starting. That money now is starting to trickle towards Ukraine. And I know that some of the charities that have been set up are very, very small. And I'm just wondering, particularly from Monica's perspective, I'm just wondering about the impact of, these small charities, some as small as, a car full of medical supplies, leaving Ireland to go to the Polish border. Just wondering about your view on that, and how best that is impacted, or how is that impacting on the situation?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, it's I'm smiling because I've been dealing with this kind of questions, like what's mostly useful. Actually, 7 months ago already, when a lot of like activist friends started to ask, shall we come to Polish-Belarusian border? And then now it's sort of the same. Like I have, like just today, I was talking to my friend from US who said, what do you guys need? And I do believe what is needed really. So first of all, I totally agree with Mariana that what needs to be like the first way of donating or supporting should be within the Ukraine for the people who are still able to do something there, because that's empowerment, right? And that's like, let them decide if they want to stay in shelter. Like that's probably the first thing to do. But the second thing I would say at the border, I do believe, like from what we observe, the basic things are there. So, when I talk to my colleagues, when I talk to people who are sort of all the time in and out on the ground, at some border crossings or in reception centers in bigger cities, etc. The basic things are there. I mean, we don't really need like full trucks of hygienic products or stuff like that coming into Poland. Probably what we need is, for example, trauma psychologists or people who are able to, think together with local Polish NGOs, with Ukrainian NGOs, moving their activities to Poland, to think about strategic solutions, what's going to happen next. Let's say we have an NGO within Grupa Granica, which is called Polish Migration Forum, which has now over, I think, 50 psychologists working with refugees from Ukraine in Poland. And they went from a couple of psychologists to have 50 within 1 month. What they need, for example, is really to just somebody step in and to help them through this strategic change and to make it sustainable, to make it the most useful for people, etc. So I do believe it's this kind of needs. It's really specialized needs, both for refugees and for people supporting refugees in Poland. And, aside from all sorts of like, what's going to happen next? Do we need relocation? Who can go where, etc., etc. With the situation right now, we need really like sort of more strategic support for NGOs. We need donors who are kind of like open-minded and willing to adapt to the needs and propose a project and say, please apply for within this framework for a project. We don't need that, because basically we are not within any, it's not like we can fit any framework anymore. We are just like absolutely it's absolute madness, so to speak. So we are not fitting any projects. It's like suddenly, as I said, you had a couple of psychologists, suddenly you have 50 because so many volunteered and they are actually, you know, willing to do it and they are okay and they are vetted, etc., etc. But like you have to organize them, you have to figure out how to, you know, how they get, like how do you organize the system? So that's just one example, but I think it's a metaphorical example of what's happening now in Poland, and like what do we need apart from, of course, you know, basic humanitarian aid, which I think is actually happening quite well, and as far as I understand, it's provided pretty well, at least at the level of borders, right? At least at the, like, you know, border crossings.
Okay, and I'm on the flip side of that, on the other side of that, I'm just wondering about how we welcome in people and the, you know, the practical things that you know, to welcome people in. What are the things that we should be providing for Ukrainian people arriving in here to Ireland? And that's to paraphrase some of the questions that have been coming in here, you know, and to include in that what type of trauma, you know, can trauma, or how can we best help people to deal with the trauma that they have experienced? So Jana, would you have any insights into that?
Thank you so much, Kieran. I was actually thinking, you know, on Monica's sharing that I suppose the longer the war lasts, the more traumatized people are going to be crossing the borders. The more psychological support will be needed. So I think the very first wave from the 24th, I cannot say they were not as traumatized, because obviously as human beings we experience trauma in very different ways. So, you know, you cannot measure the trauma, but obviously those people who are fleeing Bucha now or leaving Bucha now, and those people who are crossing the corridors from Mariupol and other places, Kherson, you know, obviously they have witnessed and experienced so much deeper trauma, and they will need so much more support. However, I was thinking also about intergenerational trauma, because Ukrainian people have experienced oppression and you know, oppression from communist Russian community, you know, and then the famine and 3 waves of famine, and then, you know, it's going back to each century. So if we are thinking about how intergenerational trauma is being passed, a lot of Ukrainian people who anywhere in the world, they experience it as being re-traumatized, and so there's that element as well. Regarding Ireland, what I can witness now, that people are looking for Ukrainian-speaking psychologists, and obviously there is a lack of them in Ireland. As well as that, we know how psychological services work in Ireland. So there are waiting times that are there already. You know, so obviously that question is not easy to answer either. We have
Zoriana, just at a very practical level, you know, the families that you encounter, what do they like the most? You know, what kind of raises their spirits with regards to when they arrive in here?
Well, I suppose the way the system set up in at the airport, it's working very well. You know, people the Ukrainian hub, as it's being called. So people are being brought to the hub. They are provided or registered for the PPS number, for their temporary protection. They are being offered some necessary items, some necessary clothes. They can access HSE supports, so health supports. They can highlight the need in immediate medical support, and so on and so forth. As Marina already mentioned, English classes are being set up. There are a lot of volunteers who would like to offer their especially teachers, primary, secondary school teachers who would like to offer English classes. But I think for the moment, what I can see, people attending coffee mornings, and maybe that's all what people can do at this stage, because there's like a lot happening for them. And when we are talking about this type of integration and support, you need to take it also easy, because the process of acceptance and acknowledgement that you've been just torn out of your normality, of your normal life, and just landed somewhere into the unknown, you also need to have the time process that.
Marina, I'd like to bring you in a minute again, but I'd just like to ask Zoriana a question around the very practical aspect of why do people end up in Ireland specifically? Do they choose Ireland, or is there a list of countries, or just practically why did they come here?
Okay, so what I have been observing, first of all, we had this group, Ukrainians in Ireland, which was 7,000 people before the 24th of February, and now the group is 21,000 people in a month, a little bit more time. So the first wave of people who came to Ireland was the wave of relatives and close relatives, families, immediate families. And then those people who speak English and maybe work in the sector already that is English speaking, and that they can access labor market very quickly. And then there are people who are stuck in other countries and they cannot find a way for themselves to settle or develop, and then maybe the last one is just the human relationships. Sometimes when you meet an obstacle, or maybe you've met people who are not supportive, and there are a lot of these forums now where people can get information about how people are being treated in different countries. So obviously that's one of the influences as well.
Okay, so people are talking to each other, and
of course, yeah. Oh yes, there's the forum that I'm talking about is, and also there are Telegram app channels where they're being posted literally thousands of questions, or maybe tens thousands of questions every day, and obviously that's information flow that is there helps.
Yeah, I was curious because with the Syrian crisis, most Syrian refugees seem to want to go to Germany, and even those that were offered kind of alternatives, preferred or expressed their wish for Germany at the time. Marina, I'm very curious about your wider family and your friends network, and are you in contact with them? What are your how are they coping, and how do you plan, or can you plan for your future? Is this, is there a sense of hopelessness, or is there a sense of determination around this? And what are your experiences?
Yes, so I would like to say that for last 10 years, I've been working abroad in different universities in various countries across Europe and in the US. But at the same time, I have never lost connection with Ukraine. So I worked for different NGOs there. And every year I would spend several months at least also in Ukraine. So last time when I was in Ukraine was actually several weeks before war. And when, of course, it was already like, yeah, the US and some international experts were warning, but of course nobody believed until the very last day. And even my colleagues from international organizations based in Ukraine assured me, I will not of course name the organizations, but assured me that their security experts from the organizations told that there wouldn't be war, so I shouldn't worry because I was worried about my planes. And I have some friends of mine evacuated. Some decided to flee to other countries, but many chose to stay. And I have several friends staying actually in Kiev. And my family, my parents, and my relatives are in Dnipro. And Dnipro is like relatively safer, of course, than other cities. There are missiles still falling every night. But the troops didn't come to the region. And I would say that, and I have friends also who had close family members in Mariupol. And of course, for them it was the most difficult because there were weeks without connection. So my best friend, she couldn't talk to her mother for 2 weeks, and she had no idea whether she's alive or not. Luckily, she now evacuated from Mariupol, but there are many stories like this. But all the people who stay, I have to say that they are deliberate. I mean, I don't talk about people in Mariupol, but people in Kiev and Dnipro with whom I'm in touch every day. This was deliberate choice, and they said that they don't want to leave. That this is their house, their home, their land. And of course, I mean, you hear, and they're all very. There is this very high patriotic mood among those who stayed. And this is sad and scary, but at the same time, it's really empowering to hear like older people or like people who never spoke Ukrainian much, like, or to you before, switching to Ukrainian language and saying, I will go and I will take the last, like, I don't know, the weapon, or I will take whatever I have at home, and I will protect my land because this is my land and we will not welcome Russia here. So, there is a lot of solidarity. Like many friends of mine who have flats in Ukraine, they stopped taking rent and they provided their flats to people who need it. People take other, like if somebody chooses to leave the city, I know people who took their pets, like dogs, parrots, cats, and take care of them. Everybody volunteers. I don't know anyone who doesn't volunteer. I think everybody does something. People do translation, people help with housing, collect humanitarian aids. It's like a huge competition now who volunteers most. And I think that's in a part people's coping mechanism also. Now we all feel this need to be, helpful. So I would say that there is this very, very strong patriotic feeling, but at the same time, I have to say that, of course, despite all this admiration, and now we see the world welcoming our president and admiring Ukrainian nation, it's of course still, like as Monica said about volunteers, the same about Ukrainians. They are not, endless. The resources are not endless, and people, are now on this high level of adrenaline, of emotion, of patriotism. But the longer it lasts, the higher chances are that it will be exhausted. And people, people still believe that it will be over soon. And every time you hear in 2 weeks, that have been 40 days already. And this is, I think, what worries me the most, because we should probably stop believing that it will be over in 2 weeks, and especially those who are now in safer situation. And as Monica said, we need systemic solutions, because we can't hope that it will be over tomorrow. It won't be.
Okay, excellent. Monica, somebody's shared in the chat here a link to a capacitor program for dealing with trauma. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it, but it was something that in Maynooth University we became very familiar with. One of our lecturers, Patty Abazaglo, is a proponent of it and teaches it. we did a study a few years ago about vicarious trauma among those that are working in these conditions, those that are helping, among aid workers, among psychologists. Is this something that you know, you don't have the same imperative that Marina has? Your society, you're assisting, but your very existence, you're not fighting for that at the moment. So is this something that you're aware of? And you know, it's going on 6 weeks now. That's a long period of time for your bodies to be under stress. Is this something that you're seeing?
Yeah, of course. You know, I think I've mentioned it before, but I think what sort of happened in Poland was that a lot of response systems were set up by volunteers, by individuals, and by small NGOs. And before there was a bigger actor, be it local authorities or bigger NGO, to come into play. So they know how it works. They figured out the best way, and they are still going, right? So in the meantime, we had big actors come in. So big, you know, the Red Cross and Caritas and Médecins Sans Frontières, whatnot. But like then, you know, some systems are already there, and it's been, for example, I don't know, local firefighters or local scouts, and they kind of like are the guidance. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we're dealing with like a, you know, taking over trauma or anything like that. However, I do believe it is a big issue, right? And also because, of course, the Ukrainian refugees who come, they are very grateful and like, you know, they acknowledge it, and they are absolutely wonderful also as well in like seeing Poles helping. But as we also say, you know, it has we always say it has short legs. So it means that at some point, this whole, I think what we deal with in Poland is like very much kind of like a wave of overhyping this whole situation. I'm not even sure if that's an English word, but like we have Polish media which are absolutely like, you know, rooting for Ukraine, but in some ways it's in an unhealthy way, I would say, and I think in some ways it's really perpetuating what Mariana was talking about, like the idea that the war might be over tomorrow. You know, it's like I opened the Polish media and one of the major, you know, news websites, and the first 10 headlines is about how Russians are just losing here and losing there, etc. And as much as I absolutely believe that, you know, this news has to be broadcasted, and like, you know, we all need to root for Ukraine and help as much as we can. At the same time, I think this is not allowing for a lot of people who actually come to, as Mariana said, think about, you know, the future, right? And so I think it's not healthy. I kind of think, and I don't want to be like a villain here in this conversation, and I hope the ladies, you understand me. It's really just about like being a little bit more realistic, because you know, this kind of like a wave of welcome and enthusiasm and rooting, etc. I think it has to keep up. But we need to find a way of keeping it up for much longer. And everybody sees, like, I guess the whole Europe already sees that we need to keep it up much longer. So, yeah, I mean, you know, the volunteers are also, like, I've been working with people on the, as I said already, at the Polish-Belarusian border, which is a completely different story. And I mean, there, the level of trauma and PTSD that volunteers are dealing with is just horrendous. But like here, it's really about the people, right? It's not really, I mean, the volunteers are not really that, you know, they don't take over that much trauma, but I do believe it might happen much more at the individual level at homes. Like I have a lot of friends who tell me, okay, I have these guests and they are here now for 3 weeks. And just now it's like, it starts to which is also a normal psychological process, right? That just after some time, when you feel safe at some place, the things are starting to come out, and like, you know, suddenly you remember this horrible bombarding or whatever, like whatever, right? It doesn't have to be even people from Mariupol or Bucha. It's really just constant fear for your life and for your family, or even just the fact that the war was still a couple of 100 kilometers ago, but you just, the fear was so big that you just decided, okay, we go. And then your life as you knew it is over. I think we cannot underestimate this shock and this decision. And as long as you have not been there, like as we have not been there in this situation, we are not able to really, you know, be able to like psychologically, you know, connect to this as well. So
okay. Okay, thank you. We're into the last few questions now, and there is a question here in the chat from Anthony, and it says, "I'm curious to the extent to which trafficking is an issue, and I wonder if the speakers have a view on ensuring quick and safe access for refugees, while also ensuring safeguarding measures are in place to protect against traffickers. Thank you very much." Now, this came to our attention in our home yesterday, when we discovered that there were a number of dozen young children who'd arrived in Ireland unaccompanied from Ukraine. And for us, it was a little bit shocking. I'm not surprised because of the churn of warfare does tend to create situations where people get separated. But I'm just wondering, I suppose, internationally, what's happening, and also in Ireland, what's happening as well. Is anybody like to, of the panel, like to address that question? Yeah, Monica again, thank you.
So I'm not going to talk about Ireland, and maybe ladies, you can talk more about Ireland, but I can tell you, like on the front line in Poland, we've been warning about possibilities of human trafficking since the very beginning, since 24th of February, you know. Just to give you a perspective, before the war started, the Ministry of Internal Affairs sent the letter to local authorities saying, we might be expecting a wave of, and I quote, a wave of Ukrainian refugees. Would you be able to host some? Can you please point like some local, you know, shelters, meaning schools, etc., etc. And that was all. That's all that has been done before 24th of February. That's exactly all. On the 24th of February, when the invasion started, the Minister of Internal Affairs went on public TV and he made a huge speech about how well we are prepared as a country to welcome all of the Ukrainian refugees and how everything is in place. There are reception centers, there are shelters, there are temporary shelters, there's psychological help, legal help, and everything. So this is, you know, the reality that we were facing. On the 24th of February, we had in Poland exactly, like strictly speaking, exactly one organization dealing with human trafficking, just with human trafficking, exactly one NGO, which comprises of a couple of people. And suddenly we have 2.5 million people passing the border. So you have to imagine we have not been, as a country, as a system, prepared at all. Suddenly we have hundreds of thousands of people on the border who need transport to go further into Poland. Nowadays, I think it's much better organized because local authorities took over in majority of the places. You know, there are, I don't know, firefighters, buses, school buses and whatnot. But before, it was really quite a lot of private transport. It's still quite a lot of private transportation. So imagine you're a woman with children in a very distressed situation. You don't know what's going to happen next. You have, I don't know, very little money or whatever. Like, you're just there, you're crossing the border, and then there's somebody telling you, hey, I have a transport, I have I don't know, an apartment free somewhere, you know. This situation created horrendous, like huge possibilities for human traffickers, you know, for enslaving people into sex work. And we've been alarming about it since the very beginning. And we said the very first thing is in Poland is that all of the services, they need a training on human trafficking, on sex work. Like they really need to be prepared to spot the signs of it, you know, to pinpoint this kind of situations and stop them from happening. As far as I understand, to this day, it has not happened, unfortunately. Now, the organizations are doing what they can. I mean, there has been, you know, flyers and some sort of spread around in the cities at reception points. There has been also like some sort of online and offline workshops for volunteers, how to spot these kind of situations, etc., etc., etc. But when you mentioned unaccompanied children, I'm going to tell you the story which just happened today, and I do believe it still shows the inefficacy of the system. A couple of days ago, a friend of mine who's a single mother, and she's she's like a human rights activist, people with, you know, handicapped people with mental disorders, etc., activists. And she, a man from the local police in the city of Przemyśl came to her, and he said, because, you know, she's known for, like, you know, help, etc. And he said, hey, I have to unaccompanied 2 children. Their mother they came from Ukraine. Their mother is dying in a local hospital of cancer. She's in terminal stage. Can you please take care of them? There is no way to verify the story, of course, but then again, you know, she's trying to verify. Of course, she takes the children, because, like, who would not? How would you say, no, I'm not going to take care of, like, what would you say? The local authorities they are absolutely, you know, over the top in Przemyśl, and like they cannot do this anymore. There is no all the shelters, and also their mother is dying, so they need like a proper home to be taken care of. Today, she sent me a message, and she posted the message on Facebook, that the local court in Poland actually granted her, so without asking her, without talking to her, granted her a temporary care of the children. And as in a Polish legal system, you can do it without the presence of the, you know, of the person concerned. And she was like absolutely shell-shocked and absolutely, you know, like, it was like, what am I going to do? Okay, it's not like I'm going to, like, I don't want to kick out those children, but like, what am I going to do? You know, suddenly I'm the legal guardian of 2 children, and I really don't know their story. And for me, when I heard the story today, of course, it's an extreme, right? It's a super extreme situation. It's not like everyday situation, etc. But that just tells you what can happen in the system when you suddenly have an influx of 2.5 million people to the system, which has been very inefficient already before. We had inefficient social care system. We had very inefficient healthcare system, almost on the verge of collapse, the healthcare system. Social workers and, you know, social welfare, basically very low quality in Poland. And suddenly, you know, they are supposed to even deal with this. This is how they deal with this. This is how they do it, you know. You just know somebody that might be able to take care of some children, you bring them there, etc. So there's no way, I think, we can avoid, and we are able to, like, stop this from happening. And I do believe, unfortunately, I actually also believe, I'm not sure if it's something which is possible to be done more, but I was talking to some Ukrainian friends as well today, that maybe one of the ways of preventing that is also informing already people in Ukraine starting to travel, and to, you know, tell them about the risks and this kind of issues, because if we cannot keep them safe, like, at least make them aware that they have to, they have to try to keep themselves safe as much as it sounds horrible, and I know it, and I absolutely think the system should be able to handle it. It's like at the moment in Poland, it's really not.
Okay, so essentially you're telling me that this mother was gifted or encouraged to take two children, and then given full custody of them for a temporary period.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Zoriana, I'll bring you in after Marina. But Marina, has that been your experience, your observations of the difficulties, the challenges that are there of keeping people safe, safeguarding people, and particularly children as well within this environment?
Yes, of course. But I would say that since I'm in Slovenia, right? Slovenia doesn't have a border with Ukraine. So of course, here, as well as let's say in Germany or in Montenegro, where I'm in close contact with also the coordinator of volunteering center, it is a bit different, because here to get here is more difficult. And it's also, for example, Slovenia is not an obvious choice, probably as well as Ireland. So people who come here usually, most of them, these are people who know someone here at least, but also not always. So sometimes you do have people who are absolutely desperate and somehow made here accidentally. And we do have, even though Slovenia is much smaller than Poland, is 2 million in population, still you do see for example, ads like a guy or somebody who looks like a guy posts on Facebook, "Oh, I'm single and I have this place, so I would take some women with kids." And those are plenty. And of course, here also, even though the government sounds like very welcoming, but still, I would say most things are being done by volunteers and by the Ukrainian embassy, which is very small here. So the same, we do spread flyers, we send messages that please. Like these are the cases. This is very you can, and it's not necessarily that it is sex work case, but there are also just mean people who abuse the vulnerable position in which women with kids are. We did have a bad case when one person, he had a kind of a hostel here, and he took refugees, like mostly all of them women with kids, but then he started basically exploiting these women, asking them to do the job what paid people should be doing. And when the police came, there was a big scandal, and now he doesn't take refugees anymore. But basically, okay, there was no sex work, but there was clear abuse of his position, because he had this space, and he just wanted people basically to work for food, which are not, not the conditions in which these people should be. So yes, I would just say that unfortunately, I would say that this is the situation. But I understand that, of course, the countries that do have border with Ukraine, especially Poland, do take the major hit. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So Yana, I've been asked how many Ukrainians are in Ireland, but I'm curious about your opinion about how we protect people as well. That perhaps you might have an insight into the numbers, and that shocking piece of news that came out in the news that we had a number of dozen unaccompanied children arriving into the country.
So as I mentioned earlier, I think there are around 17,000 Ukrainian people in Ireland, but obviously the number is growing every day immensely. I suppose around the issue with accompanying children, my friend who volunteers at one of the borders phoned me a few days ago, and she asked in what way it's possible to trace family units, I suppose, back in Ukraine. And so I contacted my friend who works in police back in Ukraine, And obviously she said it's possible, you know, the official way, but we can understand the official way is a very long time. And also thinking about the emergency situation in Ukraine, I doubt that police would have a time and space to respond quickly to such requests. So maybe the suggestion that was there is, if the documents were translated to Ukrainian here in Ireland and were sent already translated, that would save the time for translation, you know, so that maybe the response could be quicker, because what they have been observing is that so-called families or assumed families are arriving with children with different surnames, which might be the case for some families, you know, if the child is from previous marriage and stuff like that. The practice in Ukraine that in the internal Ukrainian passport, either one of the parents or both of the parents would have their children registered in the internal passports. However, it might not be the case because a lot of people are fleeing without either any documents or only with, you know, some of the documents, which again is an issue. So I read myself a message of 16 years old young woman asking questions on one of the groups. What would happen if she arrived to Ireland? What would happen to her? In what way she would be supported? You know, there are people who would offer to pay for the tickets, whether Irish or Ukrainian people. You know, from that particular thread, I can say that that young person was equipped to come to the terminal and to say to authorities, I'm arriving alone, I need support, you know. So it's good to see how people are concerned and they're really supporting the young people to access the support that is needed in that case. Okay. But I can imagine that you know, there are a lot of young people who might just fall into the cracks in the system, unfortunately.
Incredibly difficult problem to solve. But your efforts and the three of you, by your contributions here tonight, I'm encouraged that you know, and I have renewed my faith in that we can deal with these issues because of the commitment and the interest and the good nature of people like yourselves. And I just want to compliment you on your commitment to the betterment of mankind, be that in research, be that in activities, be that in NGO activities. So I knew very little starting here this evening. I have learned an incredible amount from around the challenges that I never anticipated. And I've heard some really, I suppose, you know, dramatic stories that tell the reality of when people, you know, decide to use violence against each other at the scale that has been imposed on Ukraine. I'd just like to call on Aga and Quiva to close the session. I'm really grateful for your contributions here this evening. Thank you.
Hi. So yeah, I'm really kind of speechless after hearing all what you were saying, because there is so much, you know, in this war to wrap up, and there is so many unfolding issues, as Monica said, and Marina and Zoriana, that we have to look at the future, even if the current situation is very acute and very really overwhelming for everyone, but we really have to plan ahead, especially in terms of safeguarding, in terms of human trafficking, and especially safety of children that we are really worrying about. So I'm really aware of time. We are 2 minutes over time. So I just wanted to thank everyone. And just before we wrap up, as I said, I would really want to thank our speakers. I think you were all amazing and kind of opened my eyes to so many different issues. And, you know, if you have any links or information, or, as I said, donation pages that you think people should be supporting, please do share them with us, and we will share them with all the people who are participating tonight, but also we will send them, you know, we can share them on our social media. And also, as we had an issue of psychosocial supports coming up multiple times, so psychosocial supports for supporters, we actually have a resource that I would like to share with you that our colleague Quiva will just take 2 minutes to tell you about. I would really appreciate if people could stay and listen to it, because I think it's relevant to everyone who is interested in volunteering, or who is, you know, going and work on borders, or who is going to offer any support, even, you know, having people in their homes, or, you know, you can share it to someone who you know that is hosting or is going to support Ukrainians in any way, or any refugees really. So Quiva, could you please come in?
Sure. And again, I just want to echo profound gratitude for all three of the speakers, for your courage and tenacity and compassion. And I think the nuance in terms of the political analysis and the layers of that were really important vis-a-vis the contradictions in terms of those tiered responses and racialized borders in general. So vis-a-vis, and also, yeah, I think just giving us this time, which we're really conscious of with all of the things that you're holding and all of the ways that you're being pulled at the moment. Deep solidarity to you all, to your families, your communities, your friends, your colleagues. And vis-a-vis these resources, we thought it might be good just to sort of flag them with people, because we've spent the last 2.5 years sort of researching them with other cohorts of responders on the Greek islands, in the Central Mediterranean, in Calais, in the Balkan crossing, etc. And a lot of the focus has been on sort of primary and secondary trauma, on moral injury, which I think is really relevant in this context, on processing grief and loss and pain. How do we hold those in our movements? How do we hold them healthily? On the physiology of trauma, the physiological sort of activation, psychoeducation vis-a-vis sort of understanding trauma, and understanding too that oftentimes these activated responses are our bodies, our spirits, our mind's way of trying to keep us safe, of trying to keep us within the limits of our capacity. So we co-constructed with groups in Greece, Italy, Spain, and Ireland, resources that we think are sort of context specific vis-a-vis forced and other forms of migration, refuge-seeking journeys, the loss of that, the over 30,000 people who have died in the Central Mediterranean, you know, people living in limbo in camp contexts. And the reason why we feel that these could be of use, I think, to those who are gathered here tonight, are one, vis-a-vis responders themselves, social workers, educators, activists, volunteers, medics, legal advocates, etc. But also, in our experience, the more stabilized, the more regulated, the more conscious we are of our own autonomic nervous systems, our own minds, how we carry some of what comes with this work, the better allies we are to the communities that we're working with. And that piece around co-regulation is really important. So the resources are as accessible as possible. We try to situate them in the context. But as an organization and as individuals outside of our organization as well, we'd love to be able to help train and facilitate some of what we've had the honor, I think, through that sharing of courage and vulnerability that has been shared with us by so many responders over the last 2.5 years, but definitely to work in a solidarity relationship with other movements, grassroots groups, etc. And to really recognize, you know, I think that in a way, there is such wisdom in the body around so much of this. And particularly for host families receiving people now fleeing Ukraine, it is so important, for there to be that psychoeducational piece in terms of creating an environment that, as much as possible, is low and slow, is regulated and stabilized, in terms of people being able to begin, to feel safe and begin to process even some of that journey and some of that dislocation. But more than anything, thank you all. We wish we could stay for hours here listening to you, but any way that we can support your work going forward, we're very much there. So thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Quiva, for that. And thank you everyone once again for participation tonight. This is a wrap up. As Quiva said, we could really have this conversation running for much more time. So I'm really thankful for yourselves and for your time, knowing how busy you are. And thank you for all the participants here who, contributed to this discussion by asking questions and staying so long with us as well. So I wish you all the best in your work, and look after yourself also by being supporters, because you're doing amazing work, and we don't want you too stressed. I mean, it's really difficult, but you have to look after yourself as well while helping others. We have to remember about that. And as I said, we will be sending you links. So Zoriana, Marina, Monica, thank you very much. Kieran, thank you very much for facilitation. And send to the speakers, send me the links that you would like to share. And I will circulate the emails to all the participants. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.